Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's August 22nd, 2024, and today we are going to be answering the question, why Mormons love plastic surgery. We are super excited to have you with us. This episode was created in response to a new study, I believe, that came out from Brigham Young University by a couple professors there, and also this story was covered in the Salt Lake Tribune recently. And we're going to be talking about that story as well. But it turns out, for whatever reason, plastic or cosmetic surgery amongst Mormons, and particularly in Utah, is super high. Like, I think in one of the stats, like 4 or 5 times the national average, but we'll talk about that again. And we're just going to talk about why might that be? Does Mormon doctrine, Mormon theology, Mormon policy, Mormon culture have anything to do with that? And is it a good thing or a bad thing? That's one of the interesting findings. Is it a good thing or a bad thing, or does it depend? And what are the implications or recommendations? All that and so much more. And joining us today are 3 non-strangers to the Mormon Stories podcast community. You will hopefully recognize them all if you've been paying attention over the past year or years, depending on the person we're talking about. Joining us today, it's been a little bit since we've had her on, but we have Dr. Julie Hanks. Hey, Julie.
Hello. Happy to be here.
So good to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, everyone probably knows who you are, but just for the 3 who don't, tell them really quickly who you are.
Yeah, Dr. Julie Hanks, and I'm a therapist, owner of Wasatch Family Therapy. I'm also on Instagram quite a bit, talking about the intersection of mental health and women's issues and faith.
And Wasatch Family Health is a network of therapists that kind of have a Mormon expertise, but do everything, right?
Right. Yeah, we see a lot of faith transitions.
Yeah. And mixed faith couples, I'm guessing.
Yep, mixed faith. Yep. And we see the whole family, ages 3 on up.
And so if you live in the Utah area, or specifically Salt Lake, but you could probably do Zoom too, right? In Utah?
Yeah, we have Lehigh, Farmington, and Sandy.
Okay. So if everyone's always reaching out to me saying, find me a good therapist.
Give us a call.
Yeah. I hear great things. Anyway, so glad to have you.
Thank you.
And you have your own podcast, right?
I do. Ask Dr. Julie Hanks podcast.
Yeah. All right. So we're so glad to have Julie back. Also joining us again in studio, we've had you a few times recently, is Alyssa. Do you go by Alexander or Whitbeck? Is that all right?
Yeah. Yep. That's great. Hello.
Remind us who you are and what you do.
Yeah. I'm Alyssa Whitbeck. I'm a writer. A lot of the things that I write about talk about Mormonism and the experiences of women. I also teach university composition courses, and a lot of those classes talk about context for messaging, both implicit and explicit, which really comes into play when we're talking about the Mormon beauty landscape in Utah.
Yeah. And you have a TikTok, right?
I do. Yes. Liz likes words.
LYS.
Yep.
Is there an underscore?
LYS. Nope. Just Liz likes words.
Likes words.
Which okay. I do. So
you like words.
It's descriptive. Yeah.
And you helped with the slides today and some of the research.
Mm-hmm.
I guess all of you helped with some of the slides, but anyway, it's great to have you, Alyssa. And finally, last but in no way least, we're super excited to have Celeste Davis back with us. Hey, Celeste, joining us from Washington State. Is that right?
That's correct. I'm in Spokane. Yes.
All right. Well, tell us a bit about who you are again, Celeste, for those who don't know.
Yes. I'm also a writer. I write a weekly Substack called Matriarchal Blessing, where I talk a lot about patriarchy, feminism, Mormonism. My Mormon Stories episode was last year, and just happy to be here talking about this today.
Now, Celeste, if I understand it, you've written about this exact topic on your Substack. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So this is something you feel pretty passionately about.
Yeah.
Since Alyssa and Julie, both of you are creators, have y'all TikToked or Instagrammed or written about any of this or done episodes?
I have not talked about plastic surgery specifically, but a lot of talk about body image, modesty, the Mormon culture, and impact on women.
Yeah.
So lots of related topics.
You probably spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Similar boat as well. A lot of body image gender expectations, eating disorders, things like that.
Yeah. And of course, y'all should check out Alyssa's Mormon stories, because she talks a lot about, and if it's okay to say
Yeah,
this,
so go for it.
developing an eating disorder at BYU as a freshman there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So near and dear to your heart as well, these issues, as I think to all women in the United States, at least, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and begin. This will probably be a couple hours, I'm thinking, like a 2-hour kind of thing. But let's go ahead and start with the Salt Lake Tribune article. It was entitled "Do Latter-day..." Oh, I should just say welcome to those of you who are joining us on the live stream. We really hope to be able to include some of your comments or questions. I'm monitoring the comments today, so if y'all are able to on YouTube do super chats in association with your YouTube questions, that will help flag them for me, especially if there are lots of questions. But I'm going to do my best to monitor these questions and or comments and include them as I can. But we want to welcome all of you joining us through the live stream. Please subscribe and like to the YouTube channel and to Facebook. It really helps with the algorithms. And I'm always grateful for the Mormon Stories podcast donors that make all this possible. Thank you. And if you want to become a donor to keep this program alive, you can do that at mormonstories.org and click the donate button. Shout out to Gerardo, who just helped, along with my friend Dave, revamp the mormonstories.org website. It should perform a lot faster now with a lot more sleek and cool functionality, including better search and tagging and findability functionality. So check out mormonstories.org. It's had a facelift, no pun intended. And you should enjoy it. Okay, so back to the article. The article is Peggy Fletcher Stack. She's a legend, and the article is called "Do Latter-day Saints Turn to Cosmetic Surgery in a Quest for Perfection to Please God?" And then the subtitle is "New Body Image Study Shows They Undergo Such Procedures More Often Than Most Americans, but BYU researchers say these members may be misunderstanding the church's theology." And we're going to get into that. Do you want to introduce the researchers, Alyssa?
Yeah, so we have a couple researchers here, Dr. Sarah M. Coyne and Dr. Lauren Barnes. They're both professors at BYU, and they recently oversaw the largest study ever done regarding the potential connection between Latter-day Saint religion, doctrine, culture, and body image, which I think this is just a really important topic that, there's been a lot of cultural speculation for a long time about if these things are related, if this culture has any basis in doctrine, if the stats actually show that Mormon women are more likely to undergo cosmetic surgery than non-Mormon women. And so I'm really glad that these two women at BYU just kind of set to work trying to do this research, and they interviewed a lot of people, put a lot of work into this. And so we'll be able to talk more about that.
And Julie, do you know these professors?
Yeah, I've connected with both of them before. In fact, Dr. Coyne was on my podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's an episode about that. That's good to know. All right, so a couple factoids that we pulled from the study. Julie, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, Salt Lake City has more plastic surgeons per capita than Los Angeles, which is where I grew up.
Oh.
Utahns Googled breast augmentation at the highest rate in the nation.
Now I'll just okay, so those are two different things. One is just plastic surgeons per capita. I'm curious, panel, anyone surprised by that stat? Did you already know? Is this something well known by Mormon women or Utah
I've
women?
known that for quite a while. I've been following this topic of plastic surgery for a long time. I think part of it is we have a large medical school that has a plastic surgery residency.
Oh.
And Mormons like to stay by family. And so even if people go away to school, they like to come back to family in Utah. So I just think there are some cultural aspects to that as well.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from the panel?
Yeah, I'll say that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Go, Celeste.
Celeste.
Go, Celeste.
Oh, go me. Okay. Yeah, I heard this stat a few years ago, and when I first heard it, it did surprise me. We'll probably get into this later, but I feel like it kind of juxtaposed in a weird way with the Mormonism I had in my head, or the Mormonism I had kind of grown up with. It was a heavy emphasis on not being worldly. But I have been familiar with the stat for several years and kind of mulling through my own theories of why this is.
Okay. How about you, Alyssa?
That's covered it well.
Okay. I'll just say, as a man, I guess, I was surprised and not, like, when you think, and for our Never Mormons who are joining us, like, the Mormon Church has a lot of rules, as you probably all know, including it historically no tattoos, historically really strong opinions about how many ear piercings you're allowed to have, and obviously the modesty stuff we've covered almost ad nauseum, in terms of, like, don't show your shoulders, don't show your legs, don't show cleavage. And so my Mormon boy self would not predict that Mormons/Utahns would lead the nation in something that's perceived as, and we'll talk about this, being superficial, about beauty, about worldliness.
And altering your body,
Exactly.
right? You're not supposed to alter your temple.
Exactly. Because the Mormons teach that the body is what?
Sacred. Body is a temple.
Yeah. And that's actually the justification for no tattoos and no extra piercings. So immediately, if you just did a literal connection there, you'd think, well, plastic surgery
We should be the lowest if that's the case, right? But there are exceptions, which we're talking about today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then the flip side of me is the experienced side. That's like, there's kind of that running thing about, like, and I'll just give a stereotype, like the Relief Societies in Draper. We'll just pick Draper, not to pick on Draper, where, like, all the Relief Society president have had breast augmentations. Like, have y'all heard about that type of thing?
Yeah.
And so you're thinking, whoa, an entire Relief Society presidency in one ward? But, like, you hear about that. And so, like, you have to, it's kind of a mixed conceptions there. So that's what we're talking about. Okay. And then breast augmentation specifically, like, I'm sure we can get into that, but does that track when y'all think? Because should we define cosmetic surgery versus plastic surgery versus reconstruction, or do we even want to define some terms here? What do y'all think?
Yeah, we can a little bit. I mean, I think when we think of reconstructive surgery, a lot of that is after an accident. Cosmetic surgery, I mean, I think that what seems to be a little bit murky here is whether injections, Botox, et cetera, fall under that realm. That wouldn't be considered surgery, I guess. But I think the main surgeries that are most common among Mormons that we're talking about are breast augmentations and tummy tucks. But I think it's also important to note the, like, relevance of Botox, lip injections, things like that, and how this all is just kind of part of the beauty landscape right now, and it's all really prevalent, surgical or medical, etc.
Yeah. Cosmetic is what it says, for cosmetic. There's no function that's being restored, but there's a lot of overlap, especially with the tummy tuck, mommy makeover kind of thing, where there is the muscles are being repaired after having children. So there's kind of a little gray area there, whether that counts as plastic reconstruction or cosmetic surgery.
Okay. Anything to add there, Celeste?
Nope.
Okay. Well, so just this idea, just off the top, breast augmentation, like, again, Utah, the Mormon Church is really against porn. And I don't mean to make an association here, but it's where my brain goes as a Mormon man. Immediately my brain goes to pornography, and then it goes to porn's bad. But then large breasts in my mind are associated with objectification of women and sort of porn-based beauty standards. So when y'all hear breast augmentation, what naturally comes to your mind in terms of Utah and Mormon women? Anyone? I know it's a weird question.
Oh, gosh.
Does that seem obvious to you, living here?
Yes, for reasons that we're going to talk about, I think, in the slides.
Yeah.
But it's also important to talk about Utah's high porn use.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we haven't talked about whether that's connected
So that's
to
a
this.
teaser. Is that a teaser?
No, I just
Yeah, we should.
we
talk about
haven't we actually haven't planned on talking about that.
that. Okay, so a
But
note
I
to,
think there's probably some connection.
yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, a couple other stats that we'll just blow through. 14% of Latter-day Saint respondents have had major cosmetic surgery, including breast augmentation, tummy tucks, and liposuction. And I don't think people would know whether that's a big number or a small number. 14%. Some would say that seems small. Others would say it seems large. But the article's saying that it's larger than average.
Yeah, I think it said the national average is 4%.
It's on the next slide.
Okay,
I believe.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump to the next slide. 20% of Latter-day Saint respondents have undergone cosmetic enhancements such as laser hair removal, Botox injections, or skin procedures. So if the national average is 4% for cosmetic surgery, then it's something like 3 times the national average for major cosmetic surgery, and potentially 5 times the national average for cosmetic surgery, or I don't know.
We don't have the stats on that
Yeah,
for this.
but
With
a
the
multiple,
injections and
right.
3+ times the
So
cosmetic.
possibly 2, 3, 4 to 5x we're talking about. So that's huge, right? Compared to a
Yeah.
national average.
3 times is large.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through just some of the quotes from the article just to kind of give people a sense, and then I'll just ask you all to jump in at any point. Celeste, can you see this? Can you see this slide?
Yep. I'll
Do you
read
mind
it.
reading that?
Some respondents say they turned to cosmetic surgery for religious reasons, even praying about it. One woman who underwent nose surgery and breast augmentation told researchers, "I prayed, asking God if it was the right thing to do. I felt very comforted that it was right, and there was nothing that I was doing to offend God."
All right, so Celeste, I'll give you first dibs on that. What's your take when you hear about this idea of praying to God to ask about breast augmentation or cosmetic surgery?
It's an interesting one. I don't
Your
know.
Mormon self, channel your Mormon brain for a second.
Oh, I actually think my Mormon brain would be a little judgmental of this. Yeah, I think my Mormon, I'll just say outright, like, I'm so for women choosing whatever they want to do with their bodies. They should have that choice. They should have that freedom. I'm all for women feeling confident and no shame, no shade at all for any of these surgeries. But yeah, kind of like I said before, my Mormon self, and this might be just with the family I was raised. I did not grow up in Utah. I grew up in Texas. I did kind of have this image in mind when I imagined in my Mormon brain a Christ-like woman. It was very homely, like very Little House on the Prairie, like no makeup, like very austere kind of woman. And so it was like my whole Mormon life actually has been like this weird kind of juxtaposition of like what I thought was like very Christ-like compared to like what the standard was at church among women and beauty standards. So it's been kind of a wrestle my whole life to kind of make sense of this and what is spoken and what is unspoken and kind of the spoken pressure and the unspoken pressure. But I can see how all of that, I don't know, just nothing but love to the woman in this quote. It's tricky out there. It's complicated.
Yeah. Do y'all want to also share just a kind of a disclaimer for?
Oh, I was
Yeah.
thinking the same
Yeah.
thing, that I am all for women choosing. This is not anti-plastic surgery. It's like, it's your body. Yeah. So I want to say the same thing. Totally supportive. And I think if she prayed to God and got that answer, great. I personally don't think God cares about plastic surgery or tattoos or piercings, but that's just me. But I think she made a choice based on her values, and good for her.
Okay. Alyssa?
Yeah, similarly, I think we're coming at this panel with a plastic surgery, any sort of cosmetic enhancement or change is morally neutral. But I think it's just important to recognize the context that is happening here. And also, it is something that is common, and I think that is rising in rates nationwide. But people aren't having, people nationwide aren't necessarily coming to it, aren't praying to Mormon God in the same way, so I think it's important to see, why is it that women in Utah are making these decisions, and are they different than the way that women are making decisions in other places? And yeah, just kind of in response to this woman who was praying, asking if she thought that getting a breast augmentation was a good call. I do think, similar to Celeste, that my Mormon brain would have felt judgmental, partially because I think this idea, this ultimate goal in Mormonism, is this contradiction of needing to be beautiful and perfect, but without trying, without wanting to be beautiful. It just happens on accident, genetically. And so even just being able to admit, I think, from a Mormon perspective, being able to admit that she wanted to change how she looked and that she wanted permission from her heavenly Father, I think is impressive. And I hope, and like, that she was able to articulate that within a Mormon headspace.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm thinking, and again, we're going to talk about all this, but I'm just thinking about, and I'm repeating something we said at the beginning, but I'm thinking about all these messages that we've discussed previously that Mormon General Authority might say, women dress modestly or you'll be walking porn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And women, dress modestly, or, young men will have bad thoughts or impure thoughts, or kind of this rape culture idea that if you dress immodestly, and then you're assaulted, then it's your fault because you tempted or caused bad thoughts to come up in the person. Like, obviously horrible messages. So I'm trying to think about a Mormon woman who grew up with those messages, and then she's thinking, oh, maybe I will choose breast augmentation in the instance of possibly it'll make me more attractive. Like, I'm wondering how a Mormon woman might process that contradiction. I'm curious if y'all have thoughts on that.
Well, I think the phrase modest is hottest is exactly like, be modest, but also be hot, right? Show, be sexy, but not too sexy. Don't try it. There are mixed messages all over the place. And we'll get into kind of why that is.
Is that hard for, tell me, in your perspective,
Yeah.
Julie, is that hard?
Oh, I think it's really hard, because it's like, wait, you're never acceptable. You're either like not attractive enough, or too attractive, or too sexy, not sexy enough, not modest enough. Like, where's the place where you can feel good about yourself? It's very elusive.
It would be impossible
Yeah.
to know where to put that dial.
And I see that in my practice, that most Latter-day Saint women that I have worked with do not feel good about themselves and do not feel good about their bodies.
Alyssa,
And
do you have reflections?
Yeah, I was thinking, just for people who are currently active in the church, especially. And I think though, really, like, equating getting a breast augmentation to porn may not necessarily be a very accurate representation, mostly because I don't think that Mormon women, or women generally, who want to get a breast augmentation necessarily means that they plan on showing more cleavage than other women would. And so I think that's an important distinction. When people are talking about, or like when a Mormon woman is thinking about getting a breast augmentation, they might not necessarily say, I want to have bigger boobs and then show them off. Rather, I want to have bigger boobs once I'm married, or I'll still have them covered so I can look sexy when I'm covered, or whatever. But I don't think that the behavior or the dress would necessarily change based on someone getting cosmetic surgery.
Yeah. I'm thinking, like, as a young Mormon boy growing up, like, breasts were off limits, right? And you shouldn't look at them, and you certainly shouldn't do anything else with them. And so they're forbidden in that sense. But we all know that when you're told not to look at the pink elephant, you're going to look at it all the time. And I think, honestly, if I think about a way I was harmed by patriarchy / these moral standards, is eventually you go to the Louvre, or you just go to the doctor's office, or you take care of someone who's sick, and you realize these are just body parts. But when they've been exoticized and made forbidden, then as a man, and I don't mean to make this about men, but like, then you're constantly thinking about them because you were kind of primed to, but then you're also constantly feeling horrible that you're thinking about them all the time. That's like a dark inverse. I don't know if
the shame, right? And then I'm thinking about breasts, but I shouldn't be thinking about them. That means I'm a bad person. I mean, that's the harm. And then there's the obsession and the compulsive behavior that grow out of that. So I have tons of compassion for Mormon men. But I had a really interesting situation where I was with a family member who was not raised in the church and one who was, and their reaction to a scantily clad woman, or with cheeky bathing suit or whatever, it was like it wasn't even an issue for the one who wasn't raised Mormon, and the one who was, it was like, why do people dress like that? Why? How come? Right? And it was such a stark contrast. It's like, oh, it's a butt, who cares?
Yeah.
And so that just really illustrated the emotional charge that the teachings can give to body parts that are just parts of the human body.
Exactly. Celeste, let's get you in here.
Yeah, I think a really important missing piece of this puzzle is that from a very, very, very young age, basically as soon as a teenage girl develops breasts, the responsibility for men's sexuality is placed on the woman, is placed on the girl. And when you're growing up, that looks like it's your responsibility to cover your shoulders and your chest and your legs so that you don't give the boys dirty thoughts. It's your responsibility to not tempt the boys. It's your responsibility to never act like a Potiphar's wife, and to be very chaste, and to walk very chaste, and to watch your body language and dress modestly. And then once you get married, it is your responsibility to make sure that your husband does not get into porn or have an affair. So you have to be very sexually available. And I think that's a very important piece of this puzzle. And like you said earlier, it seems like a paradox that we're so warned against pornography, but then breasts maybe are, thought of as pornography. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Mormon wives to be very sexually pleasing for their husbands so they don't turn to porn, which is an interesting link. And yeah, just like Julie said with the mixed messaging, there's very intense mixed messaging, spoken and unspoken, just in the Mormon dating world, of like so much emphasis on not being sexual and not having sexual thoughts and not dressing sexually. But at the same time, there's immense pressure on getting married. In order to get to the top heaven of the celestial kingdom, you must be married. And in order to be married, you need to be sexually attractive. And so there's immense pressure to be both sexually attractive, both before marriage and after marriage, but not be sexual. So it's this very weird paradox going on with definite mixed messaging.
Speaking of that, you hear about Mormon teens or young adults getting sort of, let's just say, breast augmentation as sort of a gift in their late teens, early 20s. Is that a thing, or is that making that up?
I know people who have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alyssa?
Yeah, I do as well.
Okay. And then we don't know what the prevalence rates would be, but that seems, in my mind, abnormal. Not normal.
Well,
not in a bad way, just like not the norm is what I mean by abnormal.
So if a parent's job culturally is to prepare their children for marriage, one might think, oh, that's a way I can make my child more attractive to a potential mate, if that's the ultimate goal. So from that line of thinking, it kind of makes sense. Not that I think it's a good idea, but it makes sense, right? You want your child to be an attractive mate or partner.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's logic there for sure. Yeah. Okay, cool. This is great. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Alyssa, do you want to read this one?
Yeah. Indeed, Coyne and Barnes discovered a subtle religious impulse in individuals' decisions to enhance their bodies, the need for perfection. Respondents who were most likely to have had cosmetic surgery were those who were wealthy, since such procedures can be costly, and who also had the highest religious salience, the researchers explain. These individuals were highly religious. However, they may erroneously believe that religion is tied to perfection in a variety of ways, including physical appearance or finances, and they may attempt to conform to what is referred to as a thin ideal in United States culture.
Okay, thank you for reading that. And I would say perfection is for sure one of the top 3 themes I saw in the little Instagram stories, Julie, that you and I did.
Mhm.
Who wants to give kind of the summary of the Mormon teaching of perfection and then talk about how it might then be applied here? Anyone?
Well,
Okay.
I see this as a theme in my practice a lot is, be ye therefore perfect.
Who
And
said that?
perfect means flawless. That was
Jesus.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was talking about love, loving other people, be perfect in love. But we have taken that out of context and made it mean be ye therefore flawless. And that teaching has just been used to beat women up, right? Like to beat themselves up. I'm not perfect. I'm not this. And the standards are unrealistic of what perfection is externally. And in terms of motherhood and wifehood, it's not, perfection is not attainable. And I think we equate religiosity with financial success and appearance and your family looking a certain way. And so I think those are tied together as well. So it's like a sign that we are righteous, we're prospering, and we look the part, right? We look the part of the happy Mormon successful family.
So there's a tie in some Mormon minds between righteousness and perfectionism.
Yeah.
And beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Celeste.
Yeah,
Perfection.
I feel a little I don't know, compassion towards the Mormons who there can be this messaging of like, oh, silly Mormons, silly Mormon women, they are so perfectionistic, they just need to be perfect, or all of these things. But I think it goes so much bigger than just the culture. I think it goes straight to the top, to the Mormon God, who really doesn't dwell in unholy places or unclean things. You have to be completely clean to be in his presence and to reach the top of the celestial kingdom. You have to be completely cleansed through the atonement of all of your sins. Like, he really does demand perfection. And I think that can be said of a lot of the things with Mormon culture actually stem from the Mormon God, in my mind, like racism, sexism, homophobia, a culture of judgment, culture of perfection. All of those things are things that the Mormon God does kind of demand for the top of the celestial kingdom. So I feel like, I don't know if it's their fault that we have this doctrine and these teachings and these expectations and these standards that really do demand perfection, to be completely clean. Maybe not in this life, but in the next life. So I don't think it comes from nowhere, and I don't think it's like their fault. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, one thing that the article talked about, I don't think we ended up putting it in the slides, that just kind of goes off of what Julie was saying a moment ago about how appearance and religiosity tend to be tied together. And I think one of the things that was discussed is how when we go to church all in our Sunday best, and there's the common joke that I've seen referenced, in conference talks, like, oh, everyone's, arguing in the car on the way to church and fighting. And then you get there and, oh, you feel the spirit and everything's good. But I think that's really representative of, that chaotic morning, trying to make everything look nice. And then once you're at church, you're in your best dressed outfit, and I think you see other people looking their best, which I think is a double-edged sword. You're able to dress up and it can feel good to look nice, but then you're also going to be comparing yourself even more so. And I think there is this idea, when you see the big families and every child has the coordinating outfits and they're even matching with their parents, and I think subconsciously that can have a big effect on us, that oh man, like I want to show that I'm just as righteous as the family that has somehow 8 of the same dress in different sizes. That's beautiful and amazing. And the little girls that have their hair braided so articulately, and I remember when I was a little kid, like seeing other kids at church and their hair was braided better than my mom could braid hair, and I remember being like frustrated that she couldn't do my hair for church as well as like these other kids had their moms do their hair for church. And I think that just like seeing these people at their highs only can also just can cause or be a factor in perfectionism as well.
You just made me think, Alyssa, and y'all tell me no if you don't want to answer this question, but I'm assuming you've all felt perfectionistic tendencies in your Mormon journeys. I'm curious if you can remember like the earliest point where you started really feeling it, some sort of story or memory where you can think back and saying, here's an example of when I really started embodying this sentiment of Mormon perfectionism. Does anything come to mind?
I can't remember not feeling that.
Oh man.
Really, like as far back as I can remember, I had this desire to be, everything all the time, the best, the whatever.
Did that come? Do you think that, not to put blame on parents, but like, was there a family culture?
I'm fine blaming parents. No,
okay.
Just kidding.
Was there a family culture in your family? Like I can picture the Mormon mom. It's like you said, Alyssa, let's do the hair perfectly, and let's get all the suits, the coordinating suits and shirts and ties and hair just right, and let's all sit just in the pews in a row. Like there is this Mormon thing about like sacrament meeting, showing up, all the kids looking great. Was that in your family?
I'm one of 9. My dad was the bishop. We sat on the front row. Yes, we played the part for a long time. Then it kind of all fell apart, but
because it does, because it's too much, isn't it? Because it's too much to do.
Yeah.
It's too much to hold.
Yeah.
But was there a pressure of like, we gotta look great,
Absolutely. And my dad was famous too. So
right.
And that was another added pressure.
Yeah. For those who don't know, do you want to tell you?
Yeah, my dad's he's a musician, Lex Diaz-Avedo. He did a Mormon Stories episode a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he
wrote probably the best known Saturday's Warrior, the
music.
Stage play from the 70s. Yeah.
And I read your dad's book, Pop Music and Morality.
I'm sorry, John.
Growing up. No, I loved it. No, I loved it. It was condemned rock music and, all sorts of stuff. But I was into it at the time. He was a hero. Alyssa, do you have memories about feeling the weight of Mormon perfectionism?
Yeah.
And in your family context as well? I know your parents, by the way.
Yes, you do. I've been a perfectionist since I was really little. Like first, second grade, my teachers were commenting on it to my parents. But in a Mormon context, I mean, I think it's always been there. But I really remember at my baptism feeling so worried. And I had definitely religious scrupulosity. And I remember thinking like a swear word. I don't even know swear words. I think the only swear word I knew was damn. And I thought it, and I was just devastated. And I also remember my baptism was in the spring, and my baptism dress had a little bit of pink on it. And I remember being really stressed about that as well. My mom was like, "Oh, great, cute dress." And I was saying like, it's not completely white. Like it's not all the way pure. Like what if it doesn't count? That type of thing. So that has really was cemented into my existence at least by 8, but definitely earlier. And I don't know, my family context is somewhat confusing because I'm definitely the most anal, the most anxiety ridden. I have high achieving parents, which I think, I see them be successful. So I'm sure that made me want to be successful. But a lot of that pressure was put on myself. And I had much more laid back parents as far as like, no one was telling me that I needed to do all the things that I was doing. I was just internalizing all these messages from, I don't know, maybe church, maybe comments. I don't know.
And we'd be remiss to not acknowledge just American beauty culture, right? On women. Like, yeah, it's a layer as well. Celeste, I don't even know you enough to know whether you had or have kind of perfectionistic sides to your personality.
I do. I do. I think that for most of my life, I've known so many women around me who are more perfectionistic. So I've never really identified, but I can definitely see the threads for sure. But like similar to Alyssa, my parents were never, especially looks wise, they weren't helicoptering over me, making sure my hair was just so, or I was just so with what I was wearing, or needed to be looking a certain way. But that's very interesting looking back, how I can definitely see this unspoken pressure. Like I can think of 2 stories off the top of my head that was like, against my better judgment, I performed this, I must look perfect, or I must look really well, going to church, even though I didn't think it was that important, and I wouldn't say it was that important, but like it was a huge fight in my marriage so often because we were always late to church because I was like doing my hair and makeup. And Rich was like, it doesn't matter. I was like, I know it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're right. But like, I'm just 1 more minute, just 2 more minutes. And I was like, looking back, it's so absurd to me because I have nothing else in my life that I feel the pressure to like look that way for anymore. And so it's like, and again, it's kind of my personality to be that perfectionistic look wise, but I definitely felt that pressure at church every week. I really did. And the other story that like really did go against my judgment was like, I think it was like our last year we were attending church in like 2019. My 6-year-old daughter wanted to wear a spaghetti strap dress that a neighbor had given her to church. And I was having such, like, I knew I didn't care and I knew it didn't matter. And I knew the God in my head did not care, but I still felt this pressure of the judgment that she would get if we let her wear this spaghetti strap shirt to church, a dress to church. I wanted her to wear a shirt under it or a sweater over it. And we got into a fight and she's like, it doesn't care. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, you're right. It doesn't matter. But like, do it anyway. Just kind of this pressure, this unspoken, it was very real for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Once a kid is told that what they wear could have eternally negative consequences, and then they kind of marinate in that, that could really probably affect your psyche in significant ways for a long period of time.
Lots of therapy.
Right? That's a big deal. Yeah. That's a big
No,
deal.
personally, lots of therapy for me.
Yeah. Around that.
Yeah. Around perfectionism and just not feeling good enough.
Yeah. You don't want to feel like your body's a weapon that can do damage. Yeah. And I'm just saying that would probably amp up the tendency towards perfectionism if you think the stakes are that high. Maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Really quick, just before we leave perfectionism, like the Bible, all Christians, have the Bible. And so that Jesus quote, be therefore perfect, applies to Christians generally. So is there something, but I don't know that the average Christian has the same level of intensity that the average Mormon does, even though they're reading from the same Bible and have that scripture.
Well, they don't have all the other cultural factors, right? I mean, a lot of Christians that I grew up with, they went to church and 1 hour a week, and that was it. And they were kind and loved each other and loved God.
Or just on holidays or just every couple months.
There wasn't like the never-ending list of things that you should be doing, the rules, the regulations.
Okay. Any other theories about that?
Yeah, I think just the pervasiveness of Mormon culture, where it is already a high demand religion, it just makes everything else high demand. And I think Mormonism is so black and white as well. I mean, I think it bleeds over from the rest of the doctrine where it says this is the only right way to get to heaven. I think at least for me, and I noticed this showing up in some of both yours and Julie's comments, are that when people are told, there's only one way to make it to heaven, there's only one way to live right, then it's hard to have nuance in any area of life. And so if you're thinking this is what is beautiful, then there is only one way to be beautiful. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about the Utah Mormon women homogeny later on. But I think that's applicable as well, where, it's hard to it's hard to love your imperfections physically if everything else in your life, there's only one right way to do it.
Okay. I guess if the stakes, and even Mormon heaven has several levels. There's like lower, middle, and high.
And then high, and then high, and then high.
Yeah. And then the celestial kingdom has 3 levels in it. So once you get all these levels, maybe that implies a striving mentality versus just your in or out. You know
and it's hierarchical. It's not, if everything's hierarchical, then you have to keep climbing and doing and being.
Yeah.
And earning. And I guess we're going to talk about that later. Yeah. But John, can I point out, I think we kind of skipped over, but the term religious saliency.
Yeah.
So that was fascinating to me, that it was, if you had more money, you're more likely to have plastic surgery, but higher religious saliency. So the more that your religion impacts your daily decisions, sense of self, worldview, the more likely women were to get plastic surgery.
Yeah.
And that seems counterintuitive, but it goes along with kind of what we're talking about here, that maybe women are misinterpreting or not misinterpreting, but they're the teachings, right? Like
Yeah.
somehow God wants me to look perfect in addition to be perfect.
Yeah. That's wild. Thank you. Let's go ahead and share a quote or a comment from a viewer, listener, Gregory Turnbow. Thanks for the super chat. He writes, Mormons are experts at minimizing while driving perfection, in my opinion. In Mormonism, I feel like we overgeneralize perfection. Thank you for sharing that, Gregory. And we welcome all of your comments. Really quickly, is it worth mentioning dating and beauty standards and beauty perfectionism, particularly within a Mormon context? Like, how was BYU?
That's why I started laughing.
I saw you smiling. What's that like?
Okay, well, just since we're on the topic of plastic surgery, I was dating someone when I was at BYU. This was right around the time I had an eating disorder, and maybe this plays into it a little bit. I am petite, small-chested person. And my boyfriend, who was very Mormon, and who we actually maybe I don't want to say that. I don't want to out him as a person. But he was really respected at BYU as an LDS person, high in the church leadership as much as a single man could be rankings. Anyway, he had mentioned many times that what if you just like did more push-ups? Like maybe like your boobs would grow. And like maybe if you like moved your arms out wider, because that would be really good for your pecs. And like this definitely gave me a complex. But like, did I get a breast augmentation? No. But like the conversation was still the same of like, even though I can't touch your boobs and we're not having sex and we're just dating and everything is like above the belt as far as, not doing anything that would be considered unchaste by Mormon standards. He's asking me to do more push-ups so that I can get bigger boobs for, I don't know, just because he would like that, I guess. And I think it's also important to think about how I was like kind of surprised, but also not shocked. And it, men commenting on different parts of my appearance, both positive and negative, was not unusual by this point. And so it wasn't it didn't feel like this crazy one-off comment from this wild man that was so out of the norm of the BYU Mormon man experience.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's great. The audience is stunned by that story. Celeste,
Me too.
How about your dating experiences? Anything you want to share there? Beauty standards and dating.
Like my experience at BYU, I can't say that it was that different from my dating experience in Texas in high school. I think all men liked women that were pretty. I feel like I felt that pressure from all men. I don't know if I felt a distinct pressure from Mormon men in that way, but I do think the Time article that we're going to get to will tie into this really nicely, which is like the numbers, the pressure to be married is tied in. I don't know if I have a personal story off the bat, but
okay.
There's also the jokes that male missionaries say, like the more worn out your shoes are, the hotter your wife. There's a lot of like sayings about hot wives and how hard you work, how righteous you are. And so there's kind of a mythology around women as prize for males' righteousness, like attractive women as the prize.
Kind of a Mormon trophy wife kind of thing.
Yeah.
Faithful Mormon.
That's a great point, Julie. And what you never hear, I've heard that, and I heard that a lot on my mission and BYU, that for the elders, the harder you worked as a missionary, the hotter your wife would be. But if you flip that and reverse it, it's bizarre. Like for women, they're saying that the hotter you are, the more righteous your husband will be, which is crazy. And of course, we have all these complexes about our beauty because righteousness is the most important thing, right? And so that's directly tied, giving us this complex.
Yeah, and by the way, who's deciding how hot the woman is and what the right level of hotness as a reward for the right level of righteousness? That is a is a calculus. That's an algorithm I'm struggling with. God must be a genius.
It's just consensus, right? Like what everybody agrees is beautiful, and
I just mean theologically, the idea that God's
God cares.
like, she's a 9, he was
He's
AP.
Let's get them
together.
together. That's true.
What kind of God is doing that? Anyway. Okay. Let's go to, all right. So I think we're on to the study, the Forbes study. Is that right? Is that next? And I think, Celeste, you asked us to maybe include this. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Forbes magazine study?
Yeah, it's actually Time magazine.
Is it Time? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's okay. Yeah, so this
is
sorry.
Okay,
this is not the thing. This is
okay. This is different. Okay, go ahead. I'll just read this. Sorry. It says in 2007, Forbes magazine named Salt Lake City one of the vainest cities in America. Now that's a while ago, but vain, that's interesting. Reactions, because again, humility is taught as important, submissiveness, and eschewing worldliness. The Book of Mormon's full of messages about costly apparel and pride. So what do y'all think about this idea of Salt Lake City being tagged the vainest city? Does that vibe with you or not? And again, isn't Draper and Sandy and Provo worse than Salt Lake by Mormon standards?
Well, I think it's Salt Lake, probably broader, right?
Yeah.
But you would think, based on the teachings in the Book of Mormon about costly apparel and, puffed up and tinkling, whatever,
brass
jewelry.
Yeah.
But in my experience, having lived in Utah for a few decades now, it is like the beauty industry is hot. I go back east to visit my son and his family, and it's such a stark contrast. I'm like, where are all the nails and the lashes and the Botox and the big lips? So you go elsewhere and it's very apparent that it's a focus here.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to the pink elephant thing that you mentioned earlier, John, how we're told not to think about something, and that just makes us think about it constantly. And so, I mean, I always remember thinking about that with modesty. If you're told to really pay attention to where your skirt is hitting, if it's hitting your knee or just above your knee or just below your knee, it makes me look at my legs a lot more and a lot more critically than if I'm just getting dressed. And so I think that when we're told so much to be humble and have humility and be Christ-like, but we're also really paranoid about making sure that everything's tucked and prim and making sure nobody's seeing anything, it just makes us focusing on our bodies so much more. And I think it ends up having kind of the backfire effect a little bit unintentionally for many women.
Interesting. Now, Celeste, you don't live in Utah, but you did go to BYU. Thoughts on Salt Lake and the vainest city?
Yeah, I think it goes into like there are these reasons why we shouldn't be vain, right? Like if there's this spoken like don't be vain and scriptures and commandments, like Julie mentioned, but then there's this other wave of vanity that goes against it, which is very interesting. And I think it goes to show that like these unspoken pressures, which I think we have to pull in, the pressure to be married, the pressure to be responsible for men's sexuality, to be sexually attractive, not just to get married, but for the rest of your life. So those kind of unspoken pressures outweighing maybe the spoken teaching to not be vain.
I know that like Dallas and Houston, because I've lived in both, they can both have some pretty high beauty standards as well. And you live in Tacoma. What's your perception of kind of regional comparisons in this regard, to the extent that you have observations about it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, I kind of alluded to before that this paradox did flummox me as my entire Mormon existence. Because I don't know, I grew up in Allen, Texas, and I don't remember a ton I remember getting the message that I should be Little House on the Prairie, that I should be home. And I thought the stereotype of the Mormon woman was no makeup, homeschooled, very comely, like not worldly. That's what I thought our stereotype was. And actually, it really surprised me when I was a lifeguard in Texas, and my boss asked me once, he was like, "Can I ask you a question?" And he was like, why are all Mormon girls so hot? It's so weird. Every single one I meet. And that really confused me and took me back, because I thought the stereotype was homeschooling bumpkin. And I was like, that's what people think of Mormon women and Mormon girls? Like, I had no idea. That was really confusing to me. And so then I moved to Utah, and seeing that this was like not in conflict with a lot of Mormon women was confusing to me, because I felt like I needed to repent when I was worldly, when I was vain, and when I cared about my clothes, and when I cared about my looks. And when I went on a mission, I was like, should I even bring my makeup? Like, I like purposely packed very ugly clothes so that I would like turn a new leaf and like not be vain and not be worldly, because I judged myself and I would repent for being so worldly. And then I got on my mission. I really regretted that, being so ugly all the time. And my first sisters meeting at the Sunday at the MTC, they outright were like, wear your makeup and do your hair. And I was like, what? Weird. I thought that they were going to say, don't do that. Like, don't think about yourself. Don't think about your appearance on your mission. So it was always confusing to me, but I definitely did notice a difference in Utah. And in my Utah wards, I had married wards in Provo and in Salt Lake. Definitely more of an emphasis on looks in those wards, I would say. Yeah.
Celeste, I think you're the first person to say fugly on Mormon Stories podcast. So congratulations.
Yeah.
That's a great word, fugly. Okay, let's show a couple billboards from Utah. Here's one that says, it's got a picture of the Salt Lake Temple. There's construction going on right now in the Salt Lake Temple. And the billboard reads, God's remodeling his temple. Isn't it time to remodel yours? And then the name of the plastic surgery company. Is this real? Or is this a joke or parody, satire? Do y'all know?
I don't know.
Have y'all noticed billboards, plastic surgery
people
billboards?
Joke about it when they come and visit.
That-
like all the
Yeah,
cosmetic related billboards.
along the I-15 corridor.
It's unique.
I've seen for men too, lots of kind of reshape your body through cosmetic surgery for men as well. Okay. Here's another one. It says diamonds were, it's got the Wasatch Front mountain range in the background. And it says diamonds were a girl's best friend. Then Botox came along, and then it's got the name of the company. Yeah. And then of course our own Heather Gay from Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. She's got her own facility.
I just saw it.
Love Lab, Laser Lab, or Beauty Laser Lab.
Lab and Laser.
Yeah.
Life is short by the lips.
Yeah.
Is the
by the lips. Yeah.
I just saw that driving here.
This show, the Mormon Stories Today, is brought to you by Beauty Lab.
We're giving her a plug.
Yeah, by the lips. Life short by the lips or something like that. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of advertising for that. Okay. So now we're to the Time magazine article. And Celeste, this is the one that you want us to invoke, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to set it up, or should we just dive into it?
Yeah, let's dive in. I'll read some of the quotes.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so this was published in 2016 in Time magazine. It's kind of a summary of a book called Datanomics, but the title of this article is What Two Religions Tell Us About the Modern Dating Crisis. And it notes that there's been a sharp spike in cosmetic surgery among the women of two different religious traditions, one of them being Mormon women, the other one being Orthodox Jewish women. And why is this when they kind of preach the opposite? And what the whole article kind of boils it down to is dating demographics. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. I'll just read the stuff in red. So it says the LDS Church actually has one of the most lopsided gender ratios of any religion in the United States. Next slide. So quoting this says, both of these socially conservative communities are suffering from marriage crises that are testing not only their faith, but their social norms as well. Quote, you have no idea how big a problem this is, end quote, said Tristan Hunt, founder of the Mormon Matchmaker, a Salt Lake City dating agency. Hunt, a 35-year-old who only recently got married herself, told me she has 3 times more single women than single men in her matchmaking database. And then it says the lopsided numbers encourage Mormon men to hold out for the perfect wife. I call it the paradox of choice. For men, there are so many choices that choices are not made. The dream for the Mormon man is to get married and have 6 kids. As he ages, his dream never changes. But when you're a 37-year-old woman, you've already aged out of that dream. And then this, I think, is the crux here. So it's citing another study. It says psychologists Marcia Gutentag and Paul Secord argued in Too Many Women, the pioneering book on lopsided gender ratios, that women are more likely to be treated as sex objects whenever men are scarce. That is precisely what Mormon women now experience. I think that's really important, so I'll read it again. Women are more likely to be treated as sex objects whenever men are scarce. So then it goes on to say, women's bodies are up for debate. Wheelwright complained Mormon men have become much more demanding about women's looks, which in turn has made women obsessed with standing out from competition. One consequence, a culture of plastic surgery has taken root among Mormon women. And then these are just some more receipts and proof here of just how prevalent plastic surgery is. 4 plastic surgeons for every 100,000 people, which is 2.5 times the national average. And Salt Lake City
back in 2007. This is
that was in 2007. Salt Lake City residents also spend inordinate sums on beauty products, $2.2 million in 2006 on hair coloring and $6.9 million on cosmetics and skincare, compared to Oklahoma City, which spent only $172,000 and $594,000 respectively.
With a larger population.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Celeste, tell us some takeaways from that article for you.
Well, I did think that part of the article that outlines the Orthodox Jews was a very, very interesting parallel, because their situation is a lot more stark than ours in terms specifically of like teaching don't be vain and don't be worldly. Like they walk that walk much more than Mormons do in terms of like they're not even trying to be like mainstream culturally in terms of what they wear and what they look like beauty standards wise, makeup, clothing, hair, all of that. And yet they are experiencing the exact same thing. There are thousands of unwed Hasidic Jewish women in crisis because according to their doctrine, same as ours, in order to get to heaven, you must be married. And so these women are in crisis. And there's a huge uptick in anorexia and eating disorders, and as well as plastic surgeries. And in that culture, very interestingly, they have like a matchmaking system with the mothers and the sons and the daughters like matching each other. The parents basically play matchmaker and receive resumes. And the sons are just flooded nonstop. So their fax machines going off all the time with all of these women, and the women's just waiting by their phone. Like the mothers of the girls are just like, please, please, please. And even like both of the mothers are pressuring the girls to get plastic surgery and to do their makeup and to just stand out because it's so important in that culture to be married. And so very interestingly, like the author makes parallels to Mormonism, how crucial it is in our doctrine to be married and how fierce the competition can be. Like Alyssa's story at BYU, do your push-ups to like augment your breasts, like crazy stuff like that, because there's so much pressure to be married and because of this numbers game where the men get to be very, very choosy.
Yeah. And tell me if y'all have heard this. I was talking to a very successful woman in her 20s, I believe, software developer, lives in Manhattan. There's like, and she was telling me about Upper West Side is where the faithful Mormons tend to live, the Upper West Side of Manhattan, bunch of Mormons, like a hot Mormon dating scene. And she said the ratio of faithful Mormon women to men is super high, to the point where men would just like date whoever they wanted, drop whoever they wanted, pick and choose, have lots of relationships simultaneously. She said it led to a really unhealthy and a toxic culture. And I've heard very similar things about the faithful Mormon dating culture in Utah in terms of proportions.
Especially in older women and men.
Yes.
Right? Because there tend to be more faithful women than men as they get older. But then the men can also choose from younger women. And so there are just a lot of older women who have no prospects or very few.
Yeah. That just sounds like it leads to trouble. Yeah, that's hard. That's great, Celeste. Thanks for sharing that. Important factor. So let's just say, what is the Mormon Church has a lot of policies, a lot of do's and don'ts. Julie, let's ask you this. What is the LDS Church's view on plastic surgery for cosmetic purposes? And we have a slide on it.
Yeah. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has no official position on cosmetic plastic surgery in general.
Okay. Now, is that surprising? What do y'all want to weigh in?
It's just interesting that there have been policies or suggestions for other ways to alter your body, but not for plastic surgery.
Such as
like piercings, tattoos, those specifically, or like extremes in hairstyle, that's even been mentioned, or too tight, clothing. So it's just interesting. Like, we're not going to weigh in on this. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Alyssa?
I mean, on the one hand, it's like, okay, I'm glad they're bowing out a little bit. But I mean, I think a lot of people are trying to philosophize why is it that they are okay with plastic surgery, but they're not okay with tattoos and piercings. And I think I think there's something about how tattoos and piercings are, I'm wondering if the Mormon perspective is that's changing your look, that's making you look less natural, but you don't have to tell people about getting breast augmentation or a nose job or something. You can make that seem natural. So I think so many elements, I think, of Mormon culture are of secrecy and of keeping things kind of hidden and under the radar, and where tattoos and piercings are visible representations, and a lot of plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery can be more subtle, or I wonder if that plays a factor.
Yeah, I think tattoos and piercings are counterculture, or are perceived by older people as being a statement like against the mainstream, but plastic cosmetic surgery is seen as being part of the mainstream.
Interesting.
Right? Part of like American beauty standards.
Interesting. Celeste, do you have theories on why Mormon church leaders don't prohibit plastic surgery? Any theories? I've got one.
It is an interesting omission, since they police like so much else about women's look. But I think Alyssa and Julie nailed it on the head. Yeah.
All right. I have a theory. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
It's men making the rules.
Yep.
And the men the women, you could say the women this isn't always true, it turns out, and we'll see this. But you could say that for some women, they're trying to reach certain beauty standards to be attractive to men. And if the cosmetic surgery is making women more attractive to men, why wouldn't men want lots of plastic surgery? It's
great.
Just patriarchy 101. What do you think?
Yeah. And I mean, I think what the first comment about the double earrings and the tattoos from Hinckley, his main statement was that they were ugly, and then it kind of became more important and more culturally relevant from there. But originally it was just an old man saying that he stylistically didn't like the way tattoos and piercings looked. But I don't think he necessarily had an issue with how really big boobs looked. So it might not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Something that's interesting, I've had tattooed eyeliner, but I don't have a tattoo, right? But it's for beauty, so it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to like make a statement. It's to enhance my beauty.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting.
You like my theory, Celeste?
I do, actually. Men benefit. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Why did it take a man to come up with that one? At least I'm trying to be introspective. Okay. Well, let's see what Jeffery R. Holland has to say about beauty standards. I'm trying to remember. I think this is a Mormon apostle, one of the most senior apostles in the church right now. I think he's acting president of the Quorum of the 12, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see what he has to say about beauty standards.
Are bombarded in movies, television, fashion magazines, and advertisements with the message that looks are everything, The pitch is, if your looks are good enough, your life will be glamorous and you will be happy and popular. That kind of pressure is immense in the teenage years, to say nothing of later womanhood. In too many cases, too much is being done to the human body to meet just such a fictional, to say nothing of superficial, standard. As one Hollywood actress is reported to have said recently, we have become obsessed with beauty and the fountain of youth. I am saddened, she said, by the way women mutilate themselves in search of that, including young women. I see them pulling this and tucking that. It is like a slippery slope. You can't get off of it. It is insane what society is doing to women. Close quote. In terms of preoccupation with self and a fixation on the physical, this is more than social insanity. It is spiritually destructive, and it accounts for much of the unhappiness that women, including young women, face in the modern world. And if adults are preoccupied with appearance, tucking and nipping and implanting and remodeling everything that can be remodeled, those pressures and anxieties will certainly seep through to children. At some point, the problem becomes what the Book of Mormon called vain imagination. And in secular society, both vanity and imagination run wild. One would truly need a great and spacious makeup kit to compete with beauty as portrayed in media all around us. Yet at the end of the day, there would still be those in the attitude of mocking and pointing their fingers, as Lehi said, because however much one tries in the world of glamour and fashion, it will never be enough.
Okay. Julie, I saw a facial reaction there. Do you want to go first? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, my reaction was because it's so shaming and blaming of women.
That talk?
Yeah, you're being so vain. It's what's left out is the male-female dynamic. And it seems like it's, women don't get caught up in the vain things of the world, but not an acknowledgement of the cultural, patriarchal aspects of all of this, right? So it's like, come on, don't buy that stuff, women. But it's so much bigger than that. And so I imagine hearing that, and if you've had cosmetic surgery, going like, oh, I'm in that great and spacious building now. Oh no, it feels more blaming and shaming to women than looking at the systemic problems within the church culture.
Powerful. Celeste, what were your reactions to that?
Couple of complaints. But first off, it's rich that he was talking about the immense pressure put on teenagers, because the church is like immensely pressuring for teenagers. But I was just thinking, like, women can't win, and there's so much pressure on the minutia of a woman's life in the church, starting from when she's so young, and definitely involving how she looks, and like measuring inches of sleeve caps and like collars and skirts above the knee, and measuring this and that, and and also like, oh, but be attractive and attract a husband, and don't give yourself up to laziness or never caring about your looks. Oh, but don't care too much. Oh, but don't get surgery, you loser. Oh, but have sex with your husband whenever he wants it and be always available to him, but don't get surgery. What are you, selfish, vain? Like, it's just so much.
All right, thank you for that. Celeste. Alyssa, your reactions to Elder Holland.
Yeah, I think for a moment I was thinking, I'm glad that he's commenting on the pressures, and then it just seemed like it began to go a little bit downhill when it became so shamey, without any sort of recognizing, the influences or why this is so impactful for Mormon women, especially. And I think probably with what clip I think is next on the slides, it just shows just how confusing it is to be a Mormon. There's just so much information we're getting all the time. And when these leaders we have so much trust in and we're told that they're speaking for God, and we can't just take everything they say with a grain of salt, I think it makes it really complicated to know how to exist and how to look and what behavior is okay and what behavior is not okay, because there are a lot of contradictions. And I think it just makes it they supposedly don't have an official statement on plastic surgery, and then they'll say things like this, and they'll say other things about how important it is to look, and I just feel like it's overwhelming and just too much stimulation.
Let's play that clip. It was put later in the slides, but just since you mentioned it, I think it really does fit well here. This is M. Russell Ballard, recently passed away, but he was a very senior apostle when he gave this talk, and we can call this a little bit of mixed messages, maybe.
You know, every time we look at you, I know you're just waiting for me to talk about marriage, aren't you? I would not want to disappoint you. I just simply say to you, brethren, wake up. Open your eyes and look around a little. And you beautiful girls, don't wander around looking like men. Put on a little lipstick now and then and look a little charming. It's that simple. I don't know why we make this whole process so hard.
It's that simple. Alyssa?
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, it's the obvious, which is just ew. But I think also, we're looking back at that video, for those that couldn't see, there's some young single adults in the background, and you can just see how uncomfortable many of the women were that were on the stand, and the couple of men that were on the stand were kind of laughing about it. And I also think that, I mean, yes, that's a small sample. There's like 3 people in the video, but I do think that's indicative of this larger cultural association with these types of talks, where Russell Ballard can make a joke about it and say, oh yeah, to talk about marriage, put a little lipstick on. And it can
said it's that simple.
It's that simple.
Well, what's wrong with that?
It's a problem because the pressure this is putting on women is really, really immense. And I think we can't reiterate enough how much pain there is for many women about the beauty standards, and how it's not just a simple thing like a little bit of lipstick. It's not even just a decision to get cosmetic surgery. It's something that has impacted women and girls from a very young age. It's something that leads to so many, really severe eating disorders and mental health, and it's not. And yeah, the pressures for marriage and for feeling, and this perfectionism, like there's so many layers and so many factors of pressure on women around how we look and around how men are perceiving us. And to be so flippant and trite about it, I think just it doesn't land at all. And I think it completely diminishes how sensitive and humiliating this is for women, especially why I say women. And yeah, it's just terrible.
Julie, I want you to say whatever you want to say, but I would love for any of you to share the dark side of these beauty standards, to contrast the sort of, it's just as simple as putting on some lipstick, but share whatever you want.
Okay.
What is he glossing over, the dark side of what he's minimizing in terms of the pain caused by things like look pretty?
What comes to my mind is, in his talk, men are the agents and women are the objects, the beautiful objects. So men get to choose, like, men, wake up, choose one of these beautiful objects. And so it's, in this subtle way, it's objectifying women,
who he refers to as girls.
Girls, which they're all women, if it's a young single adult, which is another way of being diminishing, right? It's like, oh, girls, come on, just put a little lipstick on. I mean, the number of women I've seen in my practice who have struggled with eating disorders, body image, who are suicidal because no one wants to marry them and they're 25, who aren't able to have children because of, there's just so much pressure. And this just piles on to all of the other pressure to get married, look a certain way, find a husband, and it just minimizes it.
It's glib and demeaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And objectifying all at once. Plus,
pretty impressive for a 1 minute 1 minute talk to hit all those check marks.
It's a lot of it. Celeste.
Yeah, big amen to what Julie and Alyssa just said. And just, it's like, no woman in this world today like needs to be told, just be pretty. Like, no woman can escape the pressure to be attractive. It is so woven in currently and historically back centuries, because power was kept from our only power for centuries has been the ability to attract a man. We couldn't get our own home until 1970. Couldn't have our own mortgage, couldn't have our own bank account, couldn't have our own credit card till 1974. Like, recently, our ability to attract a man has very much is linked to our ability to feed ourselves and financially have food and money. And so it's so woven into just the air we breathe. No woman needs to be told this, especially by an apostle, which people take apostles' words literally, like, whether by my mouth or the mouth of my servants, it is the same. Like he's speaking as God, right? So we have so much pressure already, whether you're Mormon, whether you're not, wherever you're living, you are not going to be immune from this pressure. We don't need it added upon. No.
Yeah. Thank you, Celeste. When I was first hearing Holland's talk, my Mormon male brain was going, good for him. He's finally on the right side of something. Like, oh, we have an apostle actually saying something good. That, trying to take away the pressure of perfectionism. That's how I was hearing the talk at first, until I looked in your eyes and saw you were kind of getting sick in your stomachs. But does I guess I have two parts of the question. Part one is, does he get credit for trying to amp down those standards and that pressure? Because I didn't hear any of that. Like, yeah, that's awesome that he's doing that. And it's because I don't get it. So any thoughts on that? Like, why aren't we going, way to go, Elder Holland, at least for the first part?
For me, it's because it's a man telling women what to do, not to do, how to feel, how not to feel. And that just gets really tiring.
Yeah, I think similarly. I mean, I am glad that there's a tiny bit of acknowledgement that there's a lot of pressure and that it doesn't necessarily, like, that everybody's okay, but it kind of falls short, I think, with what Julie is saying. And the way that he keeps going, I think it takes away some of the credibility of trying to be a positive statement.
Because it's not men's job really to have opinions about this, right?
Right. And it's not men's job to preach from the pulpit about women's appearance. Just that whole thing is wrong.
Yeah.
And the tone with which he was talking was so belittling. And even like he used the word selfish, that it was selfish to get tucked and remodeled in every way possible. And it's like, oh, especially that word selfish has just been beaten over the head of Mormon women. It is every Mormon woman's greatest fear to be selfish. We must be selfless. So especially like that, his tone and that word and the whole thing just felt like so dismissive and judgmental. Yeah.
Especially when we realize men created these standards that women are feeling pressure to attain.
Right. And there was an acknowledgement of that. And it's like, women, solve this problem for yourselves and don't buy into this, even though we're feeding into the problem in the
Yeah,
first
or
place.
created it.
Yeah.
The authors of it and the perpetuators of it, really. So just a side question, and Julie, you're known as someone who's still attending church and still is a person of faith on some level. Well, I'm curious, like, why didn't this talk send a ripple through Utah and through Mormon women in general and make Utah and Mormon women the least likely to engage in plastic surgery and or cosmetic surgery, especially because Mormons consider their apostles, Elder Holland, to be prophets, seers, and revelators and special witnesses of Christ. Why didn't Mormon women, quote, get the memo? I'm confused.
That's a really good question. I think it speaks to the power of all the unspoken cultural dynamics that are at play that we've been talking about and will continue to talk about in this episode, that those are more powerful than his words.
That's saying a lot, because we
Yeah.
don't Mormons tend to pay attention to what their apostles say?
Yes. Yeah. But I think that just speaks to the power of the dynamics that we're talking about, the bigger
dynamic.
Context. Yeah.
It would make an entire people kind of ignore what, and we're all, as progressive Mormons or ex-Mormons, we're always begging apostles to apologize for the priesthood ban in general conference. We're always wanting that priesthood or that general conference acknowledgement over the pulpit, because that means a lot. But in this case, apparently it doesn't really mean a lot, right? It means pretty much nothing.
People are
We're 5 times the national average.
More concerned about, being attractive so their husband doesn't have an affair and look at porn, or they're more concerned about having social capital, or they're like, those are more pressing than what he's saying one time in a conference.
Yeah, I think if this was a repeated conversation, then it probably would lower the rates of surgical procedures. But him saying that once and then
it's like 19 years ago, I think.
Yeah, and what Ballard was saying, he only made the lipstick comment that one time, but
it wasn't a general conference. It was like
yeah. But the idea of women looking good is something that is so pervasive everywhere, and marriage is talked about constantly. And I think this also just kind of plays into how maintenance levels for women for beauty are continually increasing. The idea that men don't have to wear makeup to be considered looking hygienic, but women do. And it seems like that is continually, the standards for women are continually increasing just on a maintenance level, to look clean at all. Nails are becoming increasingly popular. Lashes are becoming increasingly popular. Botox is becoming increasingly popular. The bar is just always raising. And I think it's really hard to listen to one kind of shamey talk and have that internalized in the same way that just a pressure cooker of, if you're not participating in these things, then not only are you not attractive, but even people are even looking at it as a hygiene thing, almost, not necessarily with plastic surgery, but with other levels of women's maintenance expectations. I think it's yeah.
Celeste, anything you wanted to add to that particular question about why Mormons didn't get the message?
No, I think they nailed it.
Okay. Let's go ahead and jump. Julie, you put together some slides about what's going on in Utah with some stats that you pulled together.
Yeah.
If it's all right, let's jump to those.
Yeah, that's great.
And have you talk through kind of some of the data that you found.
Yeah. So there's some really interesting statistics that the research shows. Can you pull up that slide there? Yeah. So people in Utah marry on average 3 years earlier than their U.S. counterparts. There's a lower average age of first birth and one of the highest fertility rates in the U.S. So using a personal example, I got married at 20, had a baby at 21, had a second baby at 24, almost 25. None of my high school friends from LA were even married. So I have the body of a 25-year-old that has given birth and breastfed 2 kids. Yeah. And they still have their, bodies that have not gone through that. And so I think these stats really show or help explain what's going on in Utah, that women's bodies are changing faster and earlier and more drastically than their counterparts in other states. Then can you go to the next slide?
Absolutely.
Utah has one of the highest breastfeeding rates, the largest average household, also cultural homogeneity. So 87.6% of the population identifies as white, and 57 are Mormon, which is the highest, state with the highest population of one religion. And homogeneity, there are things that happen in societies that are homogenous that don't happen in other societies. There's more competition. In this one research study called it social contagion can happen. So it's like, comparing and wanting to, keep up with the Joneses. So I think these stats really help explain some of why the rates of plastic surgery are so high.
Okay, so let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. So
Yeah.
you're saying Mormon women get married younger, start having kids younger,
have
more kids younger,
Mm-hmm.
and then in addition, they have higher breastfeeding rates.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us who are dumb, tell us what implications that has for the body.
Breastfeeding?
Everything, all that.
Oh, well, your skin is expanded and then retracts and sags. You lose breast tissue. A lot of women, their muscles separate in their stomach, and so they have separation, and their core is not as strong. They have saggy skin, stretch marks. So depending on the woman, it varies, but a lot of people
Also weight gain.
Weight gain and loss.
Yeah.
Or just gain. So childbirth and breastfeeding change a woman's body. And then you add to that the focus on motherhood and being a wife, and is more important than a career or education. So what do women have that's theirs, right? Like
their law career, of course.
Right. Well, if you're the current General Relief Society president,
but that's new.
But that's totally
Super
new.
new.
Yeah. So, and I've heard women say this: I want, mommy makeover is a reward for going through all that suffering, right? Like I got married young, I had a bunch of kids. Now I want to do something for me, right? Because they may not have been developing other parts of themselves because they've been growing a large family at a very young age.
But you're also kind of saying their body has been brutalized.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Compared to other people their age, they may not look as good in a swimsuit, or, may have more stretch marks or saggy skin.
And can I just add, so much of the feedback we saw, it wasn't about how men perceived them. It was about how they felt about themselves.
But those are tied. You cannot separate those in a patriarchal society, because how we see ourselves is based on the male gaze, even though I may not be aware of it. Right. So it's and in the next, I think it's the next slide.
Jump to it.
We can go to that.
Yeah.
The impact of patriarchy. So physically attractive women have more power in their household. So if you do not have economic power, if you do not have the education that gives you power, attractiveness can give you power in a marriage relationship where you may not have as much power as your spouse. And then you add the patriarchal, the men preside, those kind of teachings. Physically attractive people just in general are well received socially. So there's the social capital if you're attractive.
They get better jobs, they're
Right.
liked more, they have more friends.
Exactly. Exactly. They're
Yeah.
seen as more successful.
Yeah.
And then cosmetic surgery, a scholar, Kathy Davis, in this one study said, cosmetic surgery belongs to a broad regime of technologies, practices, and discourses which define the female body as deficient and in need of constant transformation. And then you think about the 86% of plastic surgeons are male.
80, okay, yeah.
Is that
okay.
80?
81, yeah.
81%.
Yep.
And then 90% of cosmetic surgery patients are female. So can you
That's
imagine
stunning.
a group of female surgeons doing penile implants all day, or pectoral implants? And I know that happens, but that's the exception. You go, what? That
Well, a
doesn't
whole
make sense.
industry.
Right.
What if there were a massive industry of female plastic surgeons doing penile enlargement surgeries
it just
on
feels
men?
weird, right?
If that were in reverse, but guess what? That doesn't exist.
Right. And so those are kind of some of the patriarchal
Wow.
themes, right? Women are taught from a young age that something is deficient about them and that they need to please men in order to survive, literally for, thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so it plays into all of this cosmetic surgery. If you're told you're not good enough the way you are. And plus, we have male plastic surgeons who need to support their families. They have to create a need if there wasn't already a need.
They got to create
right?
the market.
They have to put the billboards on I-15.
Yeah.
Because they're supporting their families. They're doing what's
Yeah.
asked of them.
Let me pause. Alyssa and Celeste, do either of you have comments on those stats that Julie put forward?
Yeah, I mean, justice for these women getting the surgeries. I love those slides because it makes perfect sense why they're getting them. You do have social capital, you are respected more, you get better jobs, you're more well-liked, you're more trusted, you're more easy to get friends and fit in. And just the benefits to being attractive are basically endless. So there's very good reason that these women would choose to do that. And so it sometimes, with Elder Holland's condescension of you selfish pigs, why would you do this? It's it makes perfect sense. Our society has been set up to reward women for being attractive in so many realms, in so many ways throughout the entire course of your life. So yeah, justice for them. And it made me think too, when Julie was talking about, their attractiveness as a means to power, that's very real. And I think each of us comes into this world and we want to be respected and we want to be thought highly of, and we want that kind of recognition. And in a capitalistic society, a lot of success typically would come from your job, your education. But since a lot of that is kept from Mormon women socially and just culturally, kind of historically, we've been encouraged not to do that and to stay at home with kids, which in our culture is not very respected as a career. It makes perfect sense that we would seek respect elsewhere, and attractive women are more respected. And you have that, it is a way to gain that social capital and confidence. So it all makes sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out too, what you were mentioning earlier, Julie, about how homogeny is such an important value in Utah and for Utah culture, which I think stems back to Mormon culture as far as black and white thinking, as far as there's one right way to do things. That just leads to, we have a very, very strong in-group and a very strong out-group, and being part of the in-group includes, the way that you look, and trends end up being so much stronger here than in other places. And every semester with my students, we have a quick unit on cultural analysis. And one of the in-class activities that we do is we just recognize what are the values of our university? What are the values to build social capital within our peers? And in Utah, the students that I've taught, it's really easy, whether students are participating in the particular trends or not, it's really, really easy for students to recognize, the last time I did this, Stanley Cups were becoming really popular, and everybody knew whether they had one or not. Stanley Cup, that's the cool cup. The blonde hair is the cool thing. Everyone talks about the Utah curl. It's a very particular way that Utah women curl their hair, and there's just a few very specific things, and that's what is valued in Utah, especially among college age students, women in their 20s, that's how you are cool, is to like follow the steps. There's a very particular way to fit in. And when I was teaching at the University of Montana and I did the same activity, the students had a lot harder time even identifying what was trendy and what was cool. And I said, like, what is it that like build social capital? What is it that college students here find cool? And the only thing that the students in multiple classes could come up with is cool to stand out. It's cool to be different. That's how they were building their social capital. And so everybody having like the same water bottle did not build someone's social capital in the same way that it does in Utah. There, that would be like much more embarrassing, and like they like being different and they like having everything a little bit separate. And so I think that kind of plays a part too in everybody kind of following in the same trends. Like I've even noticed it in myself. Like I see a lot of people talking about Botox and I think, oh, like I want to fit in. I don't want to be the only person that's like, I have FOMO. I don't want to be the only person that looks my age in 10 years and everybody else looks younger. And yeah, and I think that is particularly relevant with what we value.
I remember feeling really like, I remember when Botox first came out and I thought, oh, that's going to be rare that people inject like poisonous cow, whatever into, but just in the past few years, like, yeah, women in their 20s or early 30s, and I'm not, again, no shade at all. I would have never guessed that it would come to those ages, but it's clearly, again, a function of this dynamic.
Yeah. And a lot of people are making a lot of money by sending the message that women need to change their appearance. I mean, yeah. A lot of money is being made. Yeah, that's true.
And I also want to say too that I think just kind of like with the increasing prevalence, I think, of these things, in some ways, I'm glad that people are being more open about it, about getting these procedures done, trying to eliminate the shame. It seems like we have moved a little bit as a culture from beauty standards being seen as genetic or being seen as like you don't have to try, like you're just suddenly perfect and thin with big breasts and perfect lips and no wrinkles. And now it seems like the standards are moving more into a class discrepancy where if you can afford it, then you're able to be beautiful, then you can do all of these things. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily better or worse, but it does seem like that's kind of the way that like how we're able to rank each other is less on genetics and more on wealth, and if you're able to participate in the trends.
Now, Julie, you teased out even a scripture from Doctrine and Covenants, which this is Mormon scripture that you felt was applicable. Let's go ahead and jump to that.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to the early days of the church, D&C 132, and it's talking about polygamy. Right? If a man espoused a virgin and desired to espouse another, and the first gave her consent, if he espoused the second and they are virgins and have vowed to no other man, then he is justified. He cannot commit adultery, for they are given unto him, for he cannot commit adultery. And if he have 10 virgins unto him by this law, he cannot commit adultery, for they belong to him and are given to him. And again, they are given unto him to multiply and replenish the earth. So in this scripture, women are talked about as objects, like, cattle or something. Like, they're not people. They are objects given to man, for man, to be breeders.
And in Mormon, it's Jesus talking in the Doctrine and Covenants in Mormonism, right?
Right. And this is still in Latter-day Saint scripture. And so there's this history with polygamy of women not being full people, not having agency, and being property, and being, selected and given to men. And I just think that's kind of the foundation of some of what we're talking about.
I have a friend that always used to say, like, pennies to a nickel, or pennies to a dime. Women are in Mormonism with the polygamy culture, and we still believe in polygamy in Mormonism in 2024. We're just not necessarily practicing it. But the implication of polygamy is women are worth a fraction of what a man's worth. There's no way to get around that. So Julie, you actually, so the next slide is an article from Exponent 2.
Yeah, so I thought this was really interesting. If you'll show this visual. So this is a picture of recent General Relief Society young women and primary presidents.
So top Mormon leaders who
Top
are
Mormon
women.
leaders. And so this is powerful because these are the few images of women that women and men see
Worldwide.
worldwide.
Yeah.
And there is definitely a look, right?
Do you want to, for the listeners, do you want to describe the look?
Yes. Blonde, short, well-kept hair, bright color suit.
Are they pastel colors?
No, they're like more power colors, I think. Smooth skin, primarily blue eyes, it looks like to me. It's hard to tell from the screen I'm looking on.
They're all white.
They're all, oh yeah, well that's, yeah,
Like,
of course. Well, of course that. And yeah, they're all white.
Duh.
And there's just a look. And so if these are,
It's almost, and the part has to be on the left side of their, I guess there's one.
they must
exception.
have the same stylist at the
That's
church
possible.
office building. But,
Yeah.
and yeah, they're beautiful. So this is not to say anything negative about them, but there's definitely a look of the women that are being held up as the pinnacle of female leaders in the church.
Is it okay to say thin?
It's okay to say thin. Yeah.
I mean, is that
Yeah.
fit?
Yes.
Yeah. No plus size women leaders there.
Right. And no women of color. I mean, there are women of color in the presidencies, but the presidents, these are the presidents. And I think it's a really powerful visual. And we often don't think that the female leaders are setting beauty standards, but if those are the only women you see, there's definitely a standard.
Let's go to the next slide and just describe that as well.
Yeah, so these are the current female LDS presidencies. And while there's a little bit more diversity, there's, some with dark hair, there are some women of color, but there's still.
Where? Oh, wait, I'm not seeing a woman of color, but I mean, you can't tell.
Yeah. There are a couple that are,
Okay.
There's one that's Asian and one that's Latina.
It's subtle. I'm going to say it's subtle.
But there's a look. And so I just thought that was powerful to see the images that are being broadcast around the world to other Latter-day Saints in terms of who the ideal women are.
Is it fair to say there's a Mormon woman look that like even non-Mormons could notice, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? That a Californian or a New Yorker would come to Utah and say, whoa, there's a look.
I remember somebody coming to, a wedding shower or baby shower that I had in California. And so it was a bunch of women that I grew up with that were my young women leaders. And someone came to the door and I can't remember if it's a delivery person, but they comment like, oh my gosh, this is a room full of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. They're glowing. And so it was funny that they were able to say like, oh, this is a beautiful group of women and they look different than the rest of the people in LA. Yeah. And they were all white too. That's a huge part of it.
Well, time's starting to wind down and we're not going to be able to get to all the slides. But I do think it was really powerful to see the affirming messages that so many women wrote in about in terms of being very happy that they had breast reduction or cosmetic surgery or plastic surgery. And just to show some of them, many women, Mormon women, engaged in breast reduction, and they considered that to be life-changing in a positive way. There were a lot of comments about like back problems or being exhausted or being able to exercise or clothes fitting. And so many women said breast reduction was life-changing in that regard. A lot about, I was really moved by this, about after having kids, their clothes not fitting or bras not fitting or just not feeling good about having the body that they felt comfortable in. And so many women said having breast implants to just restore them, not to something that wasn't them, but just restoring them to how they were before they started having kids and breastfeeding. so many women just said, best decision I ever made. So glad I did it. As with the tummy tucks or the mommy makeovers, where women just felt like they kind of got their body back a little bit. And so many of them said they did it for themselves. Again, you made the point that how do you tease out for themselves versus for men?
I say, if you were the only person in the world except for a plastic surgeon, would you do that liposuction, or would you? So breast reduction, they probably would, because it's a back issue, or but really, like, we can never take ourselves out of our context. So, well, I mean, and this is not to diminish their experience at all, but I think we have to take into account all of the things we've been talking about, right? Well, of course you're going to feel better because you have your social capital back, or of course you feel better because, you look more aligned with what other 30-year-olds look like who haven't had 6 kids, So, I mean, I think it's awesome. And I think we needed to keep all of the other things in mind as we talk about it.
Yeah. Cause as I was reading those accounts, I'm like, this is
inspiring, right?
This is a great ad
Yes.
for cosmetic or plastic surgery.
Yeah.
Alyssa, I'm curious what your reactions were to those narratives.
No, similar. I mean, it is just really complicated. I think just the entire industry and expectations on women's bodies. And I think it's important to be able to recognize the messages, both implicit and explicit, about what make women valuable and what give women worth, while simultaneously being happy that women are able to are in a time where they can make decisions and they're able to go through with what makes them feel good. And I'm really happy for everybody that is able to make these decisions and make them feel good, while also recognizing that, like, it didn't just exist in a vacuum, and that doesn't give it any more or less value or make it more or less moral or important or meaningful. It's just kind of like what Julie was saying a minute ago about if you were living in a world with just a plastic surgeon. I think it's also living in a world with just a plastic surgeon and also somehow erasing decades of conditioning and memory to kind of give those beauty standards anyway.
Yeah. Celeste, any thoughts on those narratives about positive aspects of surgery?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it again, justice for these Mormon women getting cosmetic surgery. Wouldn't it be great if maybe we could start completely over, just like Alyssa was saying, start from scratch, erase centuries of conditioning where women's power was connected to being attractive, and erase the $9 billion beauty industry and the intense beauty shame and expectations and pressure, and start over and not have women need to spend 30 minutes on their hair and makeup every day for work just to be professional when men get to just roll out of bed. If we could erase all of that, great. And maybe that would be great. But the truth is, we don't live in that world. We live in this world. And in this world, there are real benefits to being attractive. So I can blame no one for taking advantage of that or for wanting to be confident. Like, makes sense.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention on this is that there were several comments about how cosmetic surgery can be a form of gender affirming care. And I think it's really important to recognize that if that is a way for a person to feel more affirmed in their gender, like, we can't really criticize that.
There was a comment that JC wrote, Utah Mormon Republican legislators passed anti-trans laws, and LDS Church just worsened trans policies. So trans people struggle to change bodies and find acceptance, but okay for cisgender women. Please discuss. And we're actually going to have an entire episode on the church's new, some would say horrific, policy changes around transgender Mormons and the prohibition or the punishment for gender affirming surgeries. Yeah.
And my guess is the same people who supported those laws banning transgender, gender affirming care are getting plastic surgery, and when it's
or supporting it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, women have said, like, oh, I feel more feminine with larger breasts, or, it's like, what about the transgender people who want to feel more feminine? What, and Utah's laws. Yeah. It's just,
and again, it's men making those laws, right? Yeah.
Right.
Mostly men. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of wrap it up, this article by Coyne and Barnes, is that how you pronounce it?
Mm-hmm.
They came up with some recommendations, and I thought it would be good to end on a positive note and maybe just take turns reading some of these recommendations. So we'll do Julie, Alyssa, Celeste. We'll just take turns. So Julie, why don't you start with the first one?
Okay. Focus on the doctrines of divine nature and the role of the body in the plan of salvation, the atonement of Jesus Christ, and heavenly parents.
So do you want to give a one-sentence explanation of what that could mean or why that's useful?
Just, I think focusing on the eternal perspective, to say, just kind of your value as a human being, and the privilege it is to live in a body.
The Heavenly Father loves everyone and doesn't
And there
care
is a
about
Heavenly
appearance.
Mother.
And yeah, good. Okay, perfect. Okay, Alyssa.
Yeah, just to give a tiny bit more context
No,
to what
please.
the recommendations were for. You can go back to the slides. I can read what they said. They just said that these recommendations were for individuals, parents, friends, and local church leaders that they think could improve body image within the LDS culture, particularly in Utah. So again, this is coming from like a very LDS perspective.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's important.
Okay, so their second tip was to have open conversations around how church practices, examples, garments, the word of wisdom, modesty are related to body image. And yeah, I think that's super important, especially we've talked already about modesty and about garments, and especially how garments are not made for women's bodies in mind very well. And I think that can really play a role in women having poor body image. And if the church, if these comments by Holland had just acknowledged that in some way, even just a little bit, saying, like, we understand that this is complicated. We know that these expectations are hard. I think that would just have gone a lot better, and it would have come across with so much more empathy than with dismissiveness.
Hopefully they're paying attention.
Yeah. Hello, Holland.
All right, Celeste, you want to do number 3?
Yeah.
Sorry, here it is. Okay.
Focus on principles when teaching about modesty as opposed to practices.
Yeah, so I wonder what that might mean.
I think so you don't get lost in the weeds measuring inches above the knee, just like state of mind, maybe. I don't know.
And I think for the Strength of Youth pamphlet, they made some changes recently that I think were in large part really positive, especially for teenagers that are going to be reading this. Before, for the Strength of Youth talked about dress and modesty very harshly, talked about lines, shoulders, knees, very particular places, and now it has changed to saying like, go forward, thinking about Christ, trying to view your body as a temple, try not to, that type of thing. And I think as a general rule, that is so much better for teenagers and women.
All right, Julie, number 4.
Okay. Create a church culture that emphasizes acceptance, love, and warmth.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Amen.
All right. Alyssa, 5.
Celebrate and encourage diversity.
Ooh, diversity.
Mix it up.
Diversity of eyebrows, diversity of lips, diversity of foreheads, diversity of
Body
everything,
size.
body size. I love it. We're not good. We got a lot of work to do on that one. Celeste, number 6.
Focus on attachment to God as a primary way to reduce body image concerns.
All right. Attachment to God. I guess that's good if you're a believer. And number 7, Julie, you can close this out.
I love this one. Teach the real meaning of grace. And we didn't talk about the finding about costly grace in the study, the Coyne and Barnes study.
Mm-hmm.
They said the idea of costly grace, that you have to earn God's love, was associated with higher rates of plastic surgery.
Oh.
And so I think that I just love that phrase, costly grace. Like you have to earn your way to heaven. You have to earn God's love. That was associated with higher rates of
versus the idea that Jesus died for you, he suffered, and
right.
You're good.
You have grace. Yeah. And so I think that's an important one.
That's beautiful. Well, this has been an amazing panel. Y'all are just so thoughtful, so graceful, so wise. I'll give you all just a final chance each to just sort of any final point you want to make and plug your stuff. So Celeste, we'll have you go first.
let's see. Well, I guess final point, we didn't talk about how the church benefits from its women being beautiful, but I think it does. And I think that's why there's only sister missionaries at visitor centers. Anyways.
Mhm. And I've heard they sometimes call a particular type of sister missionary to the temple visitor centers. Have you heard that too?
I haven't.
Definitely. And I think that like I said, I think the church benefits optically from having its women be pretty. So I think that's another component. But yeah.
And Celeste, how do people find your stuff again and the good work you do?
So I'm at Celeste M. Davis. I'm also a spiritual director. You can book with me and we could talk about faith crisis, faith transition, CelesteMDavis.com. On Instagram at Celeste M. Davis, and substack.com/Celeste M. Davis is my Substack.
Thanks for joining us, Celeste. It's always so lovely to have you.
Thank you.
All right, Alyssa.
Yeah, I guess just as final words, just feeling, empathy and love toward all women in this somewhat tumultuous experience of trying to figure out body image and how to figure out how you look. So love to everybody that's in the hurdles through that. You can find me on my website, AlyssaWhitbeck.com. I have my writing linked there to various publications. The one that is most recent is called Freeing Lucy, and it was published in Mayday magazine. Also on TikTok at Liz Likes Words, or on Instagram at Alyssa Whitbeck.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming again and
Thank
for helping
you.
us make this happen, Alyssa. And Julie, you get the last word, Dr. Hanks.
Okay. Well, this has been delightful. So thank you all for this discussion. My heart is with Latter-day Saint women with an LDS background. And I just be the main character in your lives. Your worth is not attached to other relationships. It's like your life is yours. And so whether it involves plastic surgery or not, you decide, and you have the power to create the life that you want. So you can find me drjuliehanks.com, wasatchfamilytherapy.com, at Dr. Julie Hanks on most social media platforms. Ask Dr. Julie Hanks podcast. I also have a monthly group coaching that I have to run to right now.
Sorry.
And that's women with an LDS background. We talk about a variety of faith issues, emotional health, mental health, relationship issues, and it's one of the highlights of my life. So
Group stuff is so great.
I know. I love it.
All right. Well, Julie, we can't thank you enough for coming on Mormon Stories.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for what you do in the community.
Thank you.
It means a lot to a lot of people. All right. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hope this is helpful. Mormon Church, I hope you've got something good from this. We all want the Mormon Church. I think we can all agree we want the Mormon Church to be healthier for women and men, and our trans and non-binary people, members as well. So I hope this helps Mormon Church and the community at large. Be good to each other, be kind to each other. Let's be more mindful about these things, and we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.